Well, Minister, you've made some tough comments, I think, recently in relation to the capping of personal injury payments. And I think it's fair to say that this House is totally exasperated with the escalating cost of insurance. And we've had a number of debates, private members and other debates on insurance over the past 3 years. And yet the situation, many of the groups we represent, very hard-pressed, and insurance costs are constantly rising. So are you finally, and I know Senator Lawler has a bill, I think your colleague in the Shannon, in relation to this. Are you going to take stern action on this now?
Thank you. Minister. The Deputy will be aware that in July of 2016 the Government set up a special working group chaired by Minister of State Michael Darcy to analyse the high costs imposed by insurance companies and indeed to determine what action the Government might take to address any issues that might be contributing to these costs. The Cost of Insurance Working Group published a series of recommendations in 2017 and 2018, the majority of which have been implemented. Work is ongoing to implement the outstanding recommendations. The Personal Injuries Commission also undertook a major analysis of the claims process in Ireland and recommended that the future Judicial Council be assigned the function under its statute of compiling guidelines for appropriate general damages for various types of personal injury. On the specific question raised by the Deputy on the capping of insurance awards, the Cost of Insurance Working Group is examining the issue of the introduction of legislation for the purpose of capping the damages which a court may award in respect of personal injuries. In response to recommendation 5 of the Working Group's January 18 report, the Law Reform Commission is now carrying out a detailed analysis of the possibility of developing constitutionally sound legislation to delimit or cap the amounts of damages which a court may award in respect of some or all categories of personal injuries. This forms part of the Commission's 5th programme of law reform approved by the Government earlier this year. The Commission is giving this project immediate attention with the aim of publishing an issues paper over the coming months. In its final report of July last year, the Personal Injuries Commission, chaired by the former President of the High Court, Mr Nicholas Kearns, noticed this development, expressed the belief that the Law Reform Commission is the appropriate body, best equipped and indeed best resourced to undertake this study. As emerged in the course of the Working Group's deliberations, this is an area of the law replete with complex constitutional and legal issues. Recognise that the State must be cognizant of the constitutional rights of all parties and must balance those rights to ensure any encroachment on them is justified and also is proportionate and, of course, is in the common good.
Deputy Broughan. The reality is, though, I mean, you mentioned there the former President of the High Court, Nicholas Kearns, but I mean, his fundamental point was that there is a compo culture in our country. You know, slips and trips, are a key feature of the legal system, and schools, creches, shops, small businesses, local authorities, all of them have become victims of this and to the escalating cost of insurance. Now, as I said, there is a bill in the Shannon in this regard. I note, for example, the distinguished journalist Stephen Collins wrote recently about the amazing awards in our book of Quantum, which are maybe 4 or 5 times similar awards in the UK. And Mr Collins seemed to feel that the only way forward in this regard is not, as you're suggesting, to kick this into touch, perhaps, Minister, with the Law Reform Commission or the Judicial Council whenever we see it, but in actual fact to have a referendum, to put this to the people, that the inordinate awards that are made based on the very flawed and Book of Quantum estimates, is central to the problem, and that we need to move back towards recognising the rights of citizens and particularly small business, local groups, and so on.
Well, I very much share the concern of Deputy Broughan and others on this issue. As Minister for Justice, there are perhaps 2 areas which fall directly under my responsibility. One is in relation to ensuring that every effort is being made to combat perceived fraud in the matter of claims, be they exaggerated or false. And this is an issue upon which I've had discussions with An Garda Síochána, and I'm pleased to see specific initiatives in this regard. I cannot say secondly, I'm asked by Deputy Broughan what is the position regarding the Judicial Council bill. I want to recall that when this bill was first published in 2017, the primary purpose was to set up a Judicial Council which would promote and maintain excellence and high standards of conduct by judges. This is a large piece of legislation. It does require careful and due consideration. However, I'm pleased that in recent times there has been progress. The bill passed a committee stage in the Seanad in April of this year. My priority is to find agreement on a range of amendments which had already been developed, which had been the subject of ongoing consultation with the judiciary in the preceding months. In this regard in particular, I want to acknowledge the constructive engagement of Deputy Donncha O'Leary in respect of many of the amendments, none, however, of which are directly related to the issues raised by Deputy Broughan. This is a big bill. However, I'm very keen to ensure that if there are aspects of the legislation that are appropriate to the insurance industry, that I will frame an appropriate number of amendments in order to ensure that this bill can be the most appropriate vehicle down which to ensure early enactment.
Deputy Broughan.
Well, Minister, then are you actually supporting then the Seanad bill, the bill that was brought before the Seanad? Is that something that you will try and steer through the House as well? And you mentioned fraud and perjury, and a very important aspect of this whole problem. But I think the Cost of Insurance Working Group found that sufficient legislative provision exists to combat fraud and perjury in relation to some of these claims in Section 14 of the 2004 Act. But the report states, and I quote, that no instance of a prosecution or conviction pursuant to Section 14 was found by the working group. So clearly it's another piece of legislation that's not enforced. But I think, Minister, we've discussed this so many times in this particular Dáil. I think Fianna Fáil had a motion on it there just a couple of weeks ago. And again, we need some decisive action, and it's your responsibility in the whole area of the courts. So perhaps it is something that should make a huge priority.
Okay,